that digs into more of those details once you're familiar with Kanban. All right, so let's talk about what in the world is Kanban. So let's start with the principles. The Kanban principles are pretty simple. The first one is, hey, start where you are. So I think this is an interesting thing. It's a little bit different than some of the other frameworks. A lot of times, and it's not bad, it's just different. If we go in and say, oh, we're gonna go Agile, I think we're going to use Scrum. And that's very much, you go in, okay, we're gonna change everything. We're potentially gonna introduce new roles and redesign the teams. Kanban has a different approach where, hey, we're just gonna go in at the beginning and visualize and map out where you are now. We're going to respect your processes, respect your titles, and then the idea is we will start to evolve and start to make change evolutionary. The thought is it's a more humane way in some cases to introduce change to an organization. Also, one of the principles is encouraging acts of leadership through all the entire organization. So it's very much based in Agile, where we want empowered people, empowered employees, and we want to get rid of all that micromanagement. It's a focus in the customer. We want to do all the work is customer centric to make sure we're not just building more stuff faster, but we're building the right things that people want. Another principle is manage the work, right? You can't make improvements unless you have the work visible and you manage it in a certain way. And then the idea is, going along with that evolutionary change, is to evolve your policies. So, hey, you know, we want to be able to get more stuff done faster with higher quality. You monitor your metrics and then you start making changes and you see, hey, did that make things better or worse? So it's an evolution that really never ends. Any questions on the principles? It's getting sweaty in here. So one of the key differences between Kanban and a lot of the other Agile frameworks are there aren't sprints or iterations. It is a continuous flow of value. So that's one of the key differences. When would you use Kanban instead of Scrum would be, hey, we're a help desk would be an example, or we do design work and we don't know what's gonna come up tomorrow. Our marketing, it can change. I can't predict or plan more than a day in advance. When that happens, if you're using Scrum, it's very disruptive because you're continually have to cancel your sprints and then replan. With Kanban, it's nice because it's a lot more flexible with that type of work where things come in, you just have your list and then you work on them till they're done, you keep going through the system and there aren't those stops and starts. All right, it's very simple. There's only 6 practices in Kanban. It's very, very, very lightweight. The first practice is visualize the workflow. What do we mean by visualize the workflow? Anyone? Bueller?
Beat me to the Bueller.
About mapping processes?
Mapping processes is one. Make it visible. What else?
I would also say make sure that you have visibility of everything you're actually working on.
Yes. What's everybody working on? You can't manage what you can't see. Absolutely.
Then actually visualizing the command system. So which steps every task has to flow through.
Exactly. Thank you. Perfect. So not just the work items, but the flow of work, the processes that we're following. Make it visible. Otherwise, everyone's making their assumptions of what we're doing. And it makes it really hard to make improvements when you can't see what's happening or things are hidden or everyone on doesn't have a shared understanding. So visualize the workflow is number 1. That just alone will change your life. So if you're going to start with Kanban, that's the first thing we do. Like, let's make the invisible visible. Oh, and it's a magical thing. The second one is limit work in progress. Why in the world, or WIP, would we want to limit work in process?
Can you do multiple things at one time, Jill?
Some people think they can. Is that true?
No, you can't do multiple things at one time effectively.
Effectively, that's the key. Thank you. We try to do multitask and do several things at once, but when we're doing complex work, anytime I'm trying to do this and then like, oh, now I've got to switch over to do this and then this and then this, what happens is there's a minimum, this is science, people, 20% hit in productivity just from switching back and forth. Why do you think that is?
Because you have to kind of reorient yourself to the new work that you are switching to.
Precisely. Thanks, Nia.
Mhm.
Your brain, it takes all this time to get in all these little data points in your brain to, if you're say deep in code or some kind of design work, or you're writing a story, and then as soon as you get interrupted, that all disappears. So it can take 20 minutes or longer to get back to the where you were to be as productive. So this is a key ingredient to optimizing your flow, to decreasing how long it takes you guys to get stuff done.
Yeah. Yeah, Nita had said that had supported your statement in the end, saying context switching. She stated in the chat. So
Ooh, context switching. Love that. Look that up on Wikipedia. It's fascinating. Or you can read a book on it, but book schmucks. All right, the third practice is manage flow. So as work is coming in, a lot of times, that's a picture of I think it's a dam, right? Where we don't want to have these big bottlenecks where things are like stacking up and then preventing us from getting things done and increasing how long our poor customers have to wait to give our solution. So it's kind of monitoring, hey, something comes in,
Annabelle,
it's going through all our different steps and
we're gonna have
systems
to go inside if you bark.
Oh, sorry, there's some interruption. So the idea is I'm going to manage that flow. And I can't manage it unless I've visualized it. So these kind of work together. Make policies explicit. So this goes along, in my opinion, with visualizing the workflow. When you work with a group of people, everyone has their own assumptions what done means, right? Hey, once I've coded this, then I'm going to throw it over to the next column in Kanban. But there needs to be a shared understanding and agreement that this is what done means, or this is what this piece of work is ready for X. And you actually write that out so everybody agrees and sees it. And then, implement feedback loops. And they don't tell you how, or they tell you why, but hey, I want to try something. I'm going to verify, hey, did this make things better or worse? And then adapt. And that's a continual flow of improvement, essentially. And then the last one is collaborative experimental improvement. So these all really play together in the sandbox really, really well. You have to have one to have the other. It's that mentality like, hey, we don't know what we don't know. It's a complex world. We're going to try something. We're going to measure it and monitor it and then adapt. All right. There are a lot of misunderstandings I've noticed out there, at least in my experience in Kanban. And there's been some people that have been a little bit negative lately on the Twitter. Is that how you say it? And so we have a little segment here. I would like to share some of the mean tweets that people have sent some of our Agile celebrities, if you will. So let's go ahead and hear from some of these mean tweeters, how they've responded. Our first celebrity is Steve Cooper. Steve Cooper, will you please share your mean tweet with us?
I can't believe that I'm, how mean this tweet is, but it says, I'm not sure exactly what the success or failure rate is of Kanban or what metric you would use to measure it. I've spoken with nearly 150 companies that build software over the last 60 days. The pattern is frightening. Kanban is leading teams to a very barren place.
Thank you, Steve. Next, we're going to hear from Fred Ball. Fred.
Kanban is just an excuse some organizations use to hold addressing their systematic problems that prevent them from providing greater value in a shorter sustained timeline.
Hunter Horton.
Kanban is only for people who can't and or won't make promises.
Ah, low blow, low
Bring
blow.
on Twitterverse. And last but not least, Brian Holt.
Kanban is for lazy people who want to watch Netflix and lick Cheeto dust off their fingers instead of do work and be accountable for said work.
I don't know, but if that's true, I really want to start doing Kanban because I could go for some Cheetos right now.
Thank you. So some of these myths that I hear quite a bit. These are actual things I pulled from the internet or I heard from people that I work with, not at Next Step Solutions though. So let's talk about some of those myths and see if we can disprove them. Has anyone else heard any other myths that we didn't cover? Just out of curiosity here. All right. So
Well,
consolidate.
Bill,
Yes. What's that?
well, I've also heard, and actually you might hear my son in the background. He is really upset about Kanban getting a bad rap, if you can.
He's mean tweeting to the mean tweets.
That's right.
That's right. Go
He
for it.
hasn't really gotten eating solid food down yet, but he can tweet. But I've heard people dismiss Kanban by saying it's not agile. It's not even really a framework.
Interesting. So it is not a framework. It is it's a loose set. It's like a management system is what Kanban University calls it. And it's okay that it's not a framework. It's kind of like, and so, that's what I say, so. It's different than Scrum. It's not there's not one single tool in the Agile tool belt that is perfect for every implementation. That's why I love to be familiar with all the different recommendations and the different frameworks, methodologies, and systems. And then whatever work I have or whatever organization I have, I can use different pieces of each one of them, or maybe I need to use Scrum for this. There's not just a one size fits all. Thank you, Danny.
So
for that.
perhaps one cool statement regarding that I have heard is one of my colleagues said that the Kanban basically is not based on Agile, but on Lean, but Kanban can lead you to being Agile. So it's basically Kanban isn't Agile, but Lean, but can lead you to agility.
Interesting. I should do an evolution of Agile. Agile really stole a lot of stuff from Lean, from Toyota Kanban, or not Toyota, the Toyota system. So it's very much similar to Agile. It doesn't go in and say, hey, the Agile Manifesto, but it doesn't say don't do Agile. But you're right, it did start from Lean. And now we've taken it from the manufacturing world and saying, hey, this applies now to software development using some of those same practices and principles. Thank you, Lucas, for sharing that. Okay, a couple other myths I've heard. Hey, there's no proven record of success. Which companies are using it, are being successful with it? There's an excuse for companies, hey, we don't want to address these really hard to solve problems that are affecting our flow. We just want to make it simple. You can't do estimates with Kanban. I have a customer says, hey, here's a piece of work, how long will it take? And I'll be like, I don't know if I'm using Kanban. Or it's an excuse for teams to just do whatever they want. I've heard that many times. These are all myths, they're all false. So let's talk about the facts, just the facts, ma'am. It does have a proven record. People have been using Kanban for years. For whatever reason, and maybe Lucas can tell us why, it's more popular in Europe. If you see all the different, you look at the map, like there's a lot more Kanban going on in Europe and probably in Brazil too, as I recall, than the US. But there's data, there's numbers out there that proves it does work. It does help you manage your flow and decrease how long it takes you to get stuff done. It also helps provide guidance and data to help you make systemized improvements. So, you might read this book like, here's what you need to do, and here's all the stuff you need to change to be more agile or to be more productive or to deliver higher value. Kanban is very practical. It gives you the tools to say, hey, here's how we're doing right now. Let's make a change and then see how we're doing. It's customized to your organization and your type of work. It really assumes that the people employing it are intelligent and they want to improve, and doesn't tell them every little thing to do. Sometimes I hear, we have a board, so we're doing Kanban. That's not the case. So yes, you need to have a Kanban board if you're doing Kanban, but it's a lot more than that. There's so much more to it to really maximize the value you get from using Kanban. And yes, there are ways to estimate in Kanban. It's a different than you might do, say, in Scrum, but it's actually very sophisticated. They have used data science to show, hey, here's about how much work we get done in a given time, which helps me say, hey, I can tell you how long it will take me to get something done as an estimate. It's as accurate, if not more, than any other system you're using to estimate. Because what's an estimate at the end of the day?
A guess.
What's that?
Somewhat of a guess.
A guess, thank you. Yes, it's not a promise, it's a guess. It's not a commitment. Some people
Jill,
forget that. Yes, sir.
Also, you know, I've heard folks say that Kanban is only for operations teams and it doesn't work for product development. Is
Yes.
that true or is that false?
Thank you for bringing that up, is false. So Scrum might be better for a product team. Cool. Sometimes I've worked with groups, they've been doing Scrum and then they get really good at being agile, just being naturally self-motivated and self-empowered. And you can do product development in Kanban just as easily. And the thing I like about Kanban is they're not like, if you use Kanban or nothing, or you use Kanban alone. And if you do, they're saying, hey, you can use Kanban and maybe you want to take some of the stuff that helped you from Scrum and blend those together, which is awesome. There's no reason you can't do large product development. You can have a big chunk of work and break it down into smaller chunks and then monitor that depending on how you design your workflow. And we'll look at the ways you can do more complex Kanban board representations. Yeah. All right, so what about you? How can you, each person on this call, how can you benefit from Kanban? So it will provide you with guidelines, essentially how you can deliver optimum value. What do we mean by value?
Value to the client, customer?
Yes, exactly. Exactly. It's something our customer wants, and if you're a profit center, then it's something they were willing to pay you money for. So it's that ultimate goal. What are you trying to achieve as an organization? If you are working for the government, it might be, hey, we're trying to help people live better lives. So that is your ultimate piece of value. So the goal is to produce things of value that people actually want. It also provides a way to eliminate those bottlenecks. So a lot of times you may not realize this if you haven't visualized your workflow and you're not monitoring it every day. There will always be a bottleneck, something that will prevent work from flowing through your system quickly. The Kanban system enables you to see those quickly so you can pivot and make adjustments to it. There's also a whole training piece in our trainings on Kanban about balancing demand versus capability. So if anyone experienced where we've got all these requests from customers or my product owner or maybe my help desk, but we only have so much staff, so there's always kind of the mismatch, or maybe we have not enough requests and not enough work and too much capability. So Kanban, that's one of the things they talk about. Hey, that's what we need to start doing, is balancing that to help things move through faster. It also provides a way to measure and decrease lead time. What is lead time? Let's make sure we all understand what that is, because that comes up a lot in Kanban. Anyone?
Is it how long?
Lead time is the actual start from when they start from the idea all the way to the very end, right? To the delivery of the increment.
Right. That's essentially it. And I had someone else was making a comment. If you want to add on to that, please do. So it's essentially how long it takes me to get stuff done, right? From beginning to end, whether that's from request to the cache or from once the team starts working on it. How long does it take to get it complete? Why would we want that time period to be smaller and smaller and smaller?
because that's actually the time the product features need to get onto the market and finally to the customer, and then creates value, which generates money.
Exactly, exactly. We don't make money from stuff that's just sitting on our laptops or sitting in our inventory. We don't make any money, or we don't like change society until it's actually out the door. The quicker we can deliver value, things of high quality, the more successful that will be. It's something we always want to be focusing on, like, how long does this take? And we want to shrink that. Also, the longer we're working on something, a lot of times that will increase your costs, right? Because time is money, particularly in knowledge work.
And also, Jill,
Yes.
there's a comment here from Nita J, who says that it also shortens the feedback loop.
Yes. Oh, that's a very, very good point. Thank you. So once I get something to my customers, then I'll know, hey, is this really what they wanted? Do we need to pivot and make a change? And if that stretches on for 6 months or even a month, then it's going to cost me a lot more. Maybe I'm spending time building the wrong thing. Awesome. Thank you.
And then also, in regards
yes.
to lead time,
Love this.
is lead time, is it just start to finish, not a period of time prior to the start of something else?
So that's where it gets complicated. And unfortunately, there's not one definition. Kanban University has their definition. I have mine, and every other person on this call has them. So here's kind of how it works. You can measure lead time in various places within your workflow. You could measure it potentially, hey, as soon as a ticket comes in, the clock starts ticking until it's delivered. That would be interesting information to collect. It could also measure it, hey, let's just measure also how long it takes each one of our operations to take. Why would we want to know how long it takes to do, let's just say, development, and how long QA takes on an average? You can't fix it unless you can measure it, right? And you can say, hey, here's how we're doing, guys. What are some changes we want to make to our system to help shrink those lead times, whether it's both the end-to-end plus the little steps in between. Anything else, Danny?
Yes, actually. Actually, our good friend Bob, who was president. Yeah, our last webinar.
Good to see you again, Bob.
How are you?
Yeah,
Good, thanks.
welcome back. Bob asks, can Kanban help organizations prioritize projects? And if so, how?
Oh, I love that idea. You could have your own Kanban board. Let's say, hey, we have these different projects we want to work on. You have those in your, intake column, and then you have the opportunity, like, is this going to be more valuable than this, and so forth, and then track those through as they get completed. That's a good idea too. I love it. All right, thank you. And then this last bullet point, hey, we're going to do this without yelling at people. I know that sounds silly, but a lot of times managers say, oh my gosh, we need to decrease our lead time and get more stuff done. So let's go yell at the people and say, work harder, do agile harder. We know if you've done any research, that does not work. It's actually counterproductive. So one of Kanban's, I love this little saying they have is, hey, let's focus on the work, not the worker. So the key is, hey, let's look at the work, let's look at the system and the processes that we build and modify those rather than blaming our poor worker guys saying, you're not doing it hard enough. It's assumed that we've hired intelligent people who are self-managed and they're doing their best. All right, let's talk Kanban boards. Kanban boards are super cool. There are so many different online tools you can use. I'm going to demonstrate Swift Kanban, which I really like. I've used it for a long, long time. Also, if you are co-located or you're just in your house like I am and you want to do a chore list, I'll just get sticky notes and put them on a window or put them on a blank wall, and that works really well. Very low fidelity, very cheap. All right, to the tool. Where's my tool? Where's my tool, Danny?
Oh, let's get working.
There she blows. Can you see that?
Yep, looks good. What is this, Bill? What the heck?
You're impressed, aren't you?
Yes, I'm very impressed.
So this is Swift Kanban, and it's one of these less expensive tools right now. I was going to say, I'm so glad we have this COVID-19. I'm not glad at all. But a lot of these tool companies I've noticed are giving these extended free trial periods. So right now, I think it's like 30 days. It usually is only a week. So you might want to try it out, see if you like it, or just experiment with the different options that you have within Kanban. So this is just one I created. I call it my stuff I have to do. And this is all the stuff I want my husband to do. No, just kidding. That we need to do to improve our home. So here we have, these are called columns, obviously. And each column represents some type of work that you need to get done. So every Kanban board will look different based on the type of work that you're doing. So, and Hunter, correct me if I'm wrong, but suppose Hunter, she's our director of marketing. If you wanted to do a Kanban board for marketing work, the columns that she would add would probably be very different. Now, this is really basic. I recommend you break them down so it's more descriptive. Like, hey, we've got to research this, see if it's worth it. I've got to go and create the design work and so forth. In each one of these columns, you can have individuals that will do the work in them, or you can have a single person with a Kanban board and they see each work item go all the way from the left to the right. Do you have any questions on this board as we're looking at right now before I go on?
Does the Kanban board ever go right to left?
That's an interesting question. So typically, no, but so there's not a lot of rules, but there's recommendations. It's very, very flexible. So what if I had the fix the broken ice maker? So let's suppose I hired my husband, I hired someone to fix it, and then it came over to me for acceptance, and I went to use it, and I like ice, and it didn't work to my specifications. In that case, you have several different options. I could just add a little notification on this card that says defect and know that needs to be reworked. Some people do like to drag them back to the left to start over again. It just depends on what works for you. I like to not pull it back because it gets me confused, like where it's been as far as its journey, personally. Great question. All right, now if you look up here, I've got little numbers. I know it's kind of hard to see. What do you think these numbers are at the top of each one of these columns?
Work in progress limits.
Exactly. So we talked about how context switching really slows down your ability to get stuff done quickly. So rather than just saying, hey, just work on one thing at a time, human beings, I don't know, I think it's maybe survival, that I've got to always be doing multiple things at once so the tiger doesn't eat me or whatever. I don't starve to death. So these are recommendations that the team comes up on their own saying, hey, about how many items should we have in any given column at a time? And this will force them to, rather than keep on taking on more work, starting, it'll help them decrease that number and then get things done. Focus on getting things done rather than starting more work. That's how we maximize value. So a couple of things, and tools are very similar, whether you're using Swift, Kanban, Lean Kanban, Trello, or whatever. But what would happen, do you suppose, if I have a Kanban limit of 3? What if I added more than 3? What do you think will happen in my board? Any guesses? You feeling in a gambling mood?
I would say it's not possible.
Or it
It's
would
not
turn
possible?
red or something.
What's that?
Or it would turn red or something.
Potentially. So, and this is cool because you get to decide how you're going to work as a team once I exceed my WIP limits. Some tools that it won't even, you can set it so it doesn't even allow you to drag it in. Like, let's get in there. Nope, not going to happen. Some you can set settings so it actually paints this red, like you see here, violation, and things like that. It just depends on what works best for you to make it sure you don't just ignore the WIP limits. It's very tempting to ignore them. So here it's very visible. Oops, there might be certain cases where I want to pull an extra piece of work in. Why would I want to violate? That sounds naughty, but anyway, breach, is that a better word? My work in process limits
Good word.
occasionally. Why would that be okay in some circumstances?
Maybe if you added additional resources.
Potentially, yes. What if we, oh, that's true. If I got more people, I would probably want to have a conversation and say, okay, you know what, now we have an extra person, and so we're going to increase our WIP limits. Otherwise, we have people sitting around and not getting stuff done. Thank you. Also, look at this little thing I'm going to do here. You ever have work that gets blocked for one reason or another?
Not sure what
Yes.
you mean.
Yeah. So what if, like, okay, we were going to start on this, I'm going to organize the pantry, and I went to organize it and I realized, oh shoot, I don't have any of the materials that I need. So I have to go to Home Depot and buy them. So that's blocked for now until I can get that. Or a dependency on another team. There's a lot of different things will cause you to block work. So there's different policies. It depends on what you decide to do as a team, what you do with block work. Some people say, okay, once I block something, then we want to make sure this bubbles up to management saying, hey, we can't get anything done until we resolve this. And in that case, you wouldn't want to exceed your WIP limits. But sometimes it's just it's a common thing. Maybe you are dependent on another team. And rather than having idle workers, then you might want to pull something else in they work on. And then as soon as that's unblocked, then you would go in and reduce the number of items. Make sense?
Mhm.
All right. Policies. So we talked at the very beginning, one of the principles is, hey, you know, establish policies. What do we mean by policies? And is anyone who's used a Kanban board, what are some examples you could share with the rest of us?
Have an exit criteria for the different columns before they can move into the next state.
Absolutely. Why do we want to have policies and enforce them? Can we just trust people to do the right thing?
No, we can't trust people.
First. People. So it's not that they're bad people. Oh wait, sorry, go ahead.
Jill?
Yes.
With that, how about if there's undefined roles and responsibilities? Then that sort of that mixes it up a bit, right?
What do you mean? In what like? Go on, Bob.
With policies, I mean, a lot of it is that if individuals and organizations have defined roles and responsibilities, and we know sometimes that, you know, organizations have very murky, roles and responsibilities, and they blend. How does that all come into effect? This, because that certainly can stop things in progress.
Interesting. Help me. Hopefully, I'm understanding that correctly. So you're saying, hey, if I don't have very clearly defined roles, like this is what you do, I know exactly what done means for a given piece of work. Thank you. That's a really good point. What you want to do is have a meeting and come to a shared understanding. So even if with clearly defined roles, people have different opinions or assumptions about what done means. I have a bunch of stories I can share where it gets to the end, and when he was in QA and I'm like, it's done, and then my product owner, that's not done until X, Y, and Z. So that's why you need to call that out regardless of roles. And in Kanban, if you have it on a whiteboard, you can just put it on a sticky note. You have a conversation. Okay, what does done mean? Once I move this into the column, what are the expectations? What are my criteria? And I think you mentioned exit criteria. So you'd want to put one of those policies on every single one of these columns. So you make sure things aren't going back and forth. Oops, just kidding, going back. It will save a lot more time.
Yeah. Actually, there's a question in the chat from Boney about the done column. And they ask, assuming the done column grows to 100 items over time, what are the ways to manage, quote unquote, the board for better visibility and also have the possibility of tracing back what was done last month?
Fantastic question. I haven't thought about this for years. So I used to use a different one, super clunky, and it wouldn't allow you to remove these or archive. It was so dumb. So you just have to delete them. Here you can, it's very simple. You archive these, and so you can go back and see a record of them, but then it doesn't clutter up your board. That's a really good point. If I get too many cards, it kind of takes away from that instant visualization. Oh, how are we doing? Where do we need to focus our efforts? So in Swift Kanban, and I haven't done that in any of the other tools, just a couple, but it's pretty intuitive. And it has reports that you can pull, tons of different metrics. You can see the flow of value. Plus, some people like to have a separate lane that they store those all in. It just really depends on you. Most of the common tools are very flexible. Great question.
An additional idea is to create versioning. So basically that you say if you have 10 items in done, then you create a new version of your product or your software and then release it.
That's interesting. So how would you model that on your board? Because I'm curious.
Using Jira, which is quite easy, I say, but there you have the possibility to create new versions which implement all the features that have been developed.
Oh, fascinating. I like that idea. Thank you for sharing. Also, and this is kind of a cool, it might be just, just for fun, it records all the stuff as things are flowing through, and you can actually run a little video clip. It's like it does it faster to see where your bottlenecks are, and it also kind of creates that history as far as what's happened, so you can look back and make decisions.
Jill, as we are discussing how a Kanban board works, we're kind of talking about it as it pertains to this particular Swift Kanban tool. And for folks who are learning or new to Kanban, are you suggesting that this is the tool to use, or how might they implement Kanban using a different Kanban board?
Oh, not at all. This is just an example. They're all very similar. So if you've used Trello is popular, you can get, I have a free, membership or whatever, subscription. It's free and it's perfect for very simple work. Like my own personal tasks, I put those in my Trello board. There's Lean Kanban. There's so many different tools that you can explore. This is just one I'm familiar with. So thanks for that question. Or like I said, you can just do it on a whiteboard and it works just fine. It's exact same concepts.
Right. So you can create a Kanban board out of anything. It doesn't have to be a digital tool.
Not at all. In fact, that's how they start. And if you don't have to use the digital tool, maybe you're all in the same room, it's pretty cool to have it on the wall because it's in your face all the time. And it makes all the work visible for whoever walks by. And it really helps you collaborate better as a group to improve the way you're doing work. The nice thing I do like about the tools, and maybe just because I'm a metrics person, it's cool just to have it automatically give me some metrics and feedback and data, but you can do that on a paper board as well. It's hard when you have a physical board if you're not all located in the same location, so it's kind of nice. Some people I know have both. They'll have one in their office, and then they put the data in an online one so they can share it with people across the country or across the world. Other questions? All right, let's move.
So I would have a question just shortly. What do you think out of all the experience you got, what is a good feedback loop for example, retrospectives to implement into Kanban? So in Scrum, you do have your sprint cycle, but what would you suggest every week, every 2 weeks, getting a retrospective in Kanban?
Yes, great question. So in the KMP2 class, I think they just renamed it, they've actually introduced some suggested, they call them cadences. In Scrum, they call them events. They're similar to Scrum, and they have recommendations. It's a little bit looser where, hey, we recommend, you meet together as a group. They have different names. I won't go into them. Like, let's figure out a better way how we're doing work. It would be like the retrospective. And rather than saying you have to do it at the end of every 2 weeks, the team decides, hey, how often should we do this? It's very important if you don't actually schedule something on a regular basis. odds are you won't actually do that. You won't have those feedback loops. So there's a lot of other cadences that are suggested that do just what you suggested, Lucas, ensure that we have those feedback loops and we're continually improving. And what I have a lot of teams do if they're just starting out is like, hey, you know, we were doing daily stand-ups before, let's keep doing those. Those make sense. So we call those the Kanban meeting. And actually, let me talk about the Kanban meeting, like, since you brought it up. I highly recommend that each day you meet together as a team, and they call it walk the board. It really gets everyone aligned to say, where are we at? What are we going to do today to get more stuff done? It's different than a stand-up in Scrum, though, and this is how it's different. In Scrum, typically it's focused on the workers. What are the 3 questions that most people answer, each person who's on the team during a daily stand-up?
What did you do yesterday? What are you going to do today? And what are your blockers?
Exactly. Nothing
Based on the sprint goal.
Yes, exactly. There's nothing wrong with that, but the Kanban is just different. They're saying, hey, we're not worried about the workers. We just want to focus on the work. So you start on the right-hand side of the board and you review each item, say, what are we going to do to get this puppy done? What are we going to do today to get this guy done? We have those quick discussions and you go through each item in your board, you get a plan, and you make modifications if necessary. Why do you think we start on the right-hand side rather than the left?
You want to pull things instead of pushing them?
That's true too. The idea is, hey, we're not going to put more stuff in here till we have some capacity. Then we'll pull things in. That helps the entire end-to-end flow. Why else? Thank you, Brian. That's a good point.
If you start on the right side, you're kind of saying the things that are getting ready to get moved to done are higher priority for that day. Yep, exactly. Otherwise, you might fill up your day on the left side and not have any capacity left to get stuff done.
Sarah, thank you. So the focus is in, let's stop starting work and start finishing it. So these are the things you've already invested a lot of time and money. We want to get those puppies done as quickly as possible. Then look to the left and start pulling things in. Fantastic. All right.
We have a couple of other questions here, Jill.
Okay.
Sharifa asks, what is the best way to come up with the most optimal column titles? Is there a suggested limit for these as well?
How many columns you have. So titles depend. You want them to reflect the type of work that is being done in the operation. So it's very obvious to your team or anyone who sees your board, oh, this is the development work or this is the design work. So this is a terrible board because it does not do that. And as far as limits go, so when I used to coach people on Kanban back in the day when I was still learning, I would go in and have them you do like 12, 13, 15 columns, and it loses it. It's not manageable in my experience. So you want to make sure you don't make them too finite, the operations that happen, and a lot of it's trial and error. So you're not going to create your Kanban board and say, we're done. It's going to be evolving as you do work and you say, hey, it'd be better if we added another column or removed it or combined several. All right. Ooh, this time's going fast. This has been so fun. Okay,
You have another question real quick.
Okay, sure.
So Nathan asks, if we work with multiple teams on a very large project, should there be multiple boards?
Potentially. So that's the recommendation. Like if you have multiple teams, they would each have their own board. So you want to optimize the team. Otherwise, it gets kind of messy. Some of these tools do have functionality to have like a parent board, and then you can roll up the child boards to see, hey, how are we doing overall? It gets a little bit more complicated, but absolutely each team would have their own board. All right. So here are our columns. We have this row here. What do you think this row is for?
Is that the next in?
What's that? I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
The next in. So the next to do, say, for example, coming in, that you would maybe then move up at the appropriate time. I don't know, I'm guessing.
It's for urgent items, the ones that we need to just fast track.
Right, so they call it classes of service. So, hey, here's my regular flow, but maybe there's certain things that, oh my goodness, this is an emergency, as an example of a class of service, or it's a huge critical defect, and we want to have a different flow of work and make that obvious. So you would have policies saying, hey, when I've got a threat level 1 billion defect, it can go in the urgent, and then it supersedes all the work we do here. It kind of just helps if you're doing different types of work. Maybe you're doing, you know, operations and maintenance work, and you'd want that as one row, and then product development as another row, and because it would have a different flow. Make sense? They call them swim lanes. In this tool, they call it smart lanes. All right. Yes.
Catherine asks, if each teams have their own board, how do you track the traceability of work that are the same or have dependencies?
So that's where you would want to, well, I would first start with just the individual boards, right? And then just kind of manually, and then look at the more sophisticated ways. And you can do that in Swift Kanban. I used to do this with an HR group, actually, where you have that parent board, and then you can create those links, and you can see that, just like you would do like in Scrum, for example, if you're using Jira. It's just more visual than just a list.
Also, a follow-up on that question. So if we are using multiple boards for different, like for each team, their own boards, how we are making sure that we are focusing on the value when we are prioritizing? Basically, we want every team to work on the highest. So it's going to basically, if you're working on one product, it's going to be kind of common between these different teams.
Yes, yes. So it might make sense to have someone playing the role of product owner who really understands what value is from a customer's perspective. And as these items are in here, we want that person to be continually refining them, moving them up and down, and then prioritizing. So then the team's like, okay, this is ready. And then they just start at the very top, and they will pull the next one in rather than having to wait for work. But absolutely, that's like number one, and you have to have someone with that customer-centric focus to decide what items we're going to do and when. All right, great questions. I could like talk about the board all day long. So real quick, we've just got a few minutes left. As far as what kind of data you would measure from your Kanban board in order to determine, hey, how long will it take on average for us to do stuff? Just a couple things. One very important one is cycle time or lead time, just depending on which tool and methodology you're using as far as Kanban goes. And what cycle time is, it's a measure of, excuse me, basically an average of how much work we can get done in a given time frame. So as a team starts working, they'll hopefully start to be more predictable. They can say, okay, on average, we can get about 5 user stories or 5 tasks complete in a week. Oh, cool. If we start measuring this, we know, hey, we've got this much stuff in our backlog. We can get about 5 things done a week. Now I can tell you about when you'll get that thing at the bottom of the backlog complete based on our flow and our previous patterns. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So this is just a funny graph. There's a lot of different, this is what the classes go very much into detail, the metrics, how to measure them, different ways to display them, and then what to do afterwards. So cycle time is the big one, and the other, it's very similar, is throughput. So this is a measure of how many things or many items that you're getting done over time. So you can specify, hey, they want to track them, how much stuff do we get done in a week, a day? Some people do it a month, just depending on your type of work. This one's kind of funky because it just shows you different kinds of work. And then look, we're getting all this done, then we got nothing, and what in the world happened here? And it's very interesting. You'll start to see trends, and then when you see that, you can say, oh, you know what, this is when we added this new policy and we didn't get anything done. Doink, we need to roll that back, maybe try something different. You can start not only telling your customers and your business owners, this is how long X will take based on our estimates. You can also say, hey, what are some improvements we can make, and how do we know they're working? You look at your cycle time, you look at your throughput to measure. All right, other questions, other Q&A?
Yes, funny you should say that. We've got a couple of questions queued up here for you, Jill. First of all, Lucas asks, and then that might go into a question that was asked a little earlier. So Lucas asks, should Kanban boards be based on teams or on the Kanban system?
Interesting. Actually, it should be based on what they call the value stream. So in our KMP1 class, one of the first things I do, I say, okay, talk about some kind of solution or service that you're providing, and let's map out each one of the steps that you have to do to get there. And then that's the backbone. That's where you begin to develop your Kanban board. So you might have people from all over your organization report up to other people, but that is what you want to model ideally in your Kanban. Why would we want to put all that together in that fashion rather than, hey, team 7 and team 5 have their own? We want to measure our end-to-end lead time, right? That's the ultimate thing. That's what's providing the value, is all those steps working together. So it's important to have that in a single board. Great question. What else?
Yeah, so from earlier, and it kind of ties into that a little bit, I had a question from Anthony at the beginning of class who asked, is it recommended to start with the TKP or the team Kanban practitioner?
Oh.
Or could they start with the Kanban, like KMP1, for instance?
Thank you. So that was like a perfect question that just leads into this. So you either take, in my opinion, TKP or the KMP. You wouldn't want to take both. The reason is the TKP is great, like maybe you have managers who just want to understand it from a managerial perspective, that maybe aren't actually going through the steps. If you're someone who's going to be in charge of designing your board and managing the workflow, you definitely want to take that KMP class. So recommend that if you have people that, hey, you just want to send them to get them familiar with this, then send them to the TKP. If you want people to be really deep down in and making significant improvements and a deep understanding, then send them to the other class. Make sense? So just FYI, I have this next week time. I don't even know what day it is. Is it Friday yet? So I'm teaching a TKP virtual on May 6th. Just FYI, the KMP1 right now at Kanban University is still working to make that virtual. Hopefully that will be happening quickly. Their KMP2 is already virtual. I did one last week.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So yeah,
yes.
as you guys, we do have one more question
Okay.
from Sarah, but while we're on this topic very quickly, I'll just point out, folks in the chat, you'll see I provided you links to the Next Steps Solutions training page with the courses, the listed courses we have available, as well as a direct link to the webinar for next month that is advertised there. Jill has up on the screen. The next KMP1 is scheduled for June 9th, and as Jill mentioned, they have not yet created a virtual curriculum for that, but as soon as that is available to us, we will run it in virtual if that is the case at that time. The last question we have so far is from Sarah, and she asks, is there a recommendation that work items need to be similarly sized?
So it's nice. That's kind of the recommendation. Try to make them similarly sized. You don't need to worry too much about it or spend too much time doing it. Otherwise, you're just wasting money. But that's the idea. If you will occasionally have these large chunks going through, but that will leverage out over average as far as your metrics go. Great question. All right, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining. If you're interested and you have the bandwidth, we're going to meet for 15 minutes after to answer any additional questions and to chit chat, or if you'd like to share your story, you're more than welcome to stay. I hope to see you again in our next webinar or one of our upcoming trainings. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Hey, Jill, this is a great meeting. Are you going to send the recording out to everyone?
I forgot to record it.
I've got you, Jill. I'm recording it.
Oh, you
yeah,
are?
I see that's being recorded.
It says recording.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even notice. Okay, thank you. So, in fact, is Hunter still on? So, there are huge files. I know she's been putting it in a place where you have access to it potentially. We'll be sending something out. Thank you for that.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks for hosting it. Really cool community. I will be there next at the next meetup also.
Fantastic. We look forward to seeing you again, Lucas.
Thank you, Lucas.
Greetings from Germany. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Right. Cool beans. Man, that was fun.
Yeah, lots of great questions.
Yes, fantastic. I know. I get so excited. It's like, I know I talk too fast. I think it's so cool. Blah! It's
No,
awesome.
I think it, yeah, hopefully, feel free, if you are still on the line, if you're shy of speaking up, you are still welcome to post any questions in the chat. I'm still monitoring that.
Right. So Danny, I need to introduce you to my husband. He snuck in.
Oh, all right.
It's this old guy over here. Hi, Reddy.
Hi.
Oh, how about that? I was like, Jill, all I see is the bow and arrows behind you.
And that's my husband. No, this guy, Rennie, yeah. We got in a fight earlier because I invited him to the webinar a few days ago. And he's like, I don't have time. I got to work. So I'm like,
So I stuck in. It was very nicely done.
Was it all right? You're not,
it was
like,
good.
He'll give me all the notes. Here's everything you did wrong.
No.
That's what Danny's for. Never mind.
I can't answer your left to right, right to left Kanban question, though.
You can?
Mm-hmm.
Then why didn't you speak up?
We could have used you, Rennie. We could have used you, man.
Yeah, you can use it next time. Always left to right.
Always.
And the reason, even though the Japanese read right to left, is they always go left to right because it requires effort to go against the flow.
You mean right to left?
No, they move their Kanbans left to right. They read right to left.
Oh, we're going to take this offline.
Because every task requires an effort, so to them, mentally, it's like going against the flow.
Interesting. Oh, that's fascinating. Huh, thank you.
That's cool.
Yeah, I never thought
Anyway,
of that.
just gee whiz.
I would love you to share your story. He used to do, they had a sensei fly in, remember when you're a machinist?
Mm-hmm.
And from Japan to teach them it was lean, but Kanban, right?
Yeah, we did single piece flow and Kanban and all that.
It's really interesting. I tell those stories sometimes in my classes.
So no, very nice. I'm glad I could sneak in today.
Well, I hope you learned something.
Yeah, so you spent some time in Japan then, Rennie?
I did.
Yeah. Where? How long were you there?
Almost 2 years. I was in Osaka, Anada.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's beautiful. I traveled there a few years ago. It's an amazing place. It's great.
Yeah, it is neat.
Danny, you've been to a lot of places. Like, I've been to that weird place in Germany. Like,
I've been around, Jill. When we're able to get together again in person, we can have an adult beverage and talk about the place.
We can chat about it. Okay. That was cool. We had Lucas from Germany join. I wonder I should ask him what time it was there.
I forgot to ask him if he'd been on that test track or seen it.
The Autobahn or?
No, Audi has a test track there.
The Audibahn.
Well, he's going to join us next. Well, he's going to join us next time. So cool beans. Cool beans. Do you guys have other questions about Kanban or Agile or, what's the funniest food to eat online?
So I have a kind of a weird question. Have you ever seen two teams that support each other use Kanban on one team and Agile on the other team, or Scrum on the other team?
Yes. So are these teams of teams, so to speak, so they're all working on the same solution?
Yeah.
Yes. So in fact, I just taught a SAFe class, and that works just fine. There's nothing wrong with it. You'll want to make sure you have communication points so our Kanban teams don't get disconnected. So an example would be, hey, I have a team of teams where 3 of them are building the product development stuff, and then I have my maintenance team, the O&M team, and they would be running Kanban.
So how do they, what is the preferred method for them to communicate with each other and to support each other, like in, because they should feed each other, I guess.
Right. So part of it is, hey, they should be talking all the time, right? And communicating with each other. You want to have a team of team meetings maybe on like a 2-week cadence, have them
Right.
come to the system demos, have them understand what's coming down in the pipeline, and then have on there, I would suggest, hey guys, we need to coordinate together as a team of teams and then have those points. Not too many meetings, but at least a few. Also, it'd be nice if everyone has visibility to each other's workspaces. So
Right.
I could go in and I could see their Kanban board. I could go in and view their policies. I could go see the Scrum board and so forth.
So like would the Kanban team be part of the backlog grooming sessions that you would do in a Scrum environment, or?
If it made sense, and there might be like, oh, there's certain work coming up that's going to affect their Kanban team. We want to invite them. We don't want them there if it wastes their time. So it just depends if they are going to be doing some of the work items. Absolutely, you would.
So there's nothing intrinsically that interferes between the two systems. Between the two clusters. Okay.
Correct. They work together super well. It's like peanut butter and jelly.
Okay. Cool.
Okay. Awesome. Great. It's good to see you again, Aaron. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. We're just chugging along, you know.
Yeah, I hear you. You're still rocking the beard. My husband's trying to grow his out, but it's not working so good. You jealous, Rennie?
I'll throw mine.
Oh, it's good.
What we got going on here?
Wow.
I didn't put the mustache up quite as high today, though. So
that's nice.
Oh yeah, I missed that. That's cool. That is awesome.
I was a little disappointed we didn't get to see your dog today.
Oh yeah, where's Trigger? Oh, I was gonna have him do a guest appearance. I might be outside. At least he didn't bark. Ugh.
Mine were barking earlier. That's why I was on mute. So.
Oh, gotcha. Cool beans. How about Pamela, Sarah? Do you have anything to share? Questions?
We actually did one backlog, 2 Scrum teams, and 1 smaller Kanban team.
Oh,
and we described it as the Kanban team took the super hot urgent things and protected the Scrum teams from interruptions.
Oh.
And then this Kanban team worked in kind of a 2-week, I don't know, they kind of lined up with the Scrum team.
Right,
so
a little bit
sort
of
of
a
a
cadence.
checkpoint. And we said, okay, here's what's left, and at the end of the 2 weeks. It worked really well because we still needed to have commitment dates for certain work items.
Gotcha.
But we also had work that was coming in and needed a quick turnaround.
Interesting. So there was one common backlog. Oh, that's
and one
cool.
product owner.
And one
and
product.
we had,
oh, cool.
Yeah, and we had some of the people rotated in and out of the different teams.
Oh, okay. So they got bored or whatever.
Well, you know, there's that hectic, energetic pace, and then there's the sort of heads down work.
Right.
So they could go between.
That's a great model to ensure they do stay aligned. Just having a common backlog, if you could do that, that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. Cool.
Actually, that's really interesting though, because you mentioned protecting the sprint, you know, for really hot items that come in and they really do up the sprint.
Yeah, we had a period of time when we had an unusually high number of like interrupt work, and then after a few months, we were able to manage that to like less than 15%. So then we quit the separate team and just reserved 10% of the work on the Scrum teams.
Okay, that makes
sense. It was
sense.
really cool when it worked.
When it works.
There's always exceptions, right?
One of the exceptions, of course, is management folks or sales guys wanted everything to go to the Kanban team.
Right.
Everything's at level 1, expedite, yeah.
All priorities are number 1.
Yes. That is too fun.
I'm going to go ahead, Jill, and stop recording, I think, at this time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because it was great because we had some relevant information there from Sarah and Aaron that.
Oh, that was really helpful.
Yeah, if folks stay on till the end, they'll get nice support.